Today I want to show something how to prepare your car for long-term storage. Maybe you are traveling or you are preparing to travel or leave it at storage for a long time. The first step that you should do is to clean the car, the basic cleaning ya car wash. You clean the body and you clean the other side of the vehicle. At the other side, I mean behind the tires, this one, the other side, huku chini. For the other side, you clean mud, grease, and that may be on the other side. Then you clean the brake dust that may be on the rim, the brake dust, because it is aggressive and it can eat up the aluminum rim. Then you can also wax the body to add extra protection. And then on the inside, you valet it up good so that if there is any food, anything that can attract ants and rodents, so when you leave it for a long period of time, there will be nothing that can cause any inconvenience. So first step is to clean up the car from the inside and from the outside and the other side. The second point that you should consider before leaving your car for a long period of time is whether you are leaving it outside or inside. Now, this depends on your area, your climatic condition in your region, if it is hot or if it is cold. So if you are living in a hot area, you need to protect your car from the strong UV lights. Hizi za jua because they damage the car's paint, the clear coat. Unaona ako karangi kenye unaona gari ikishine. The UV lights will damage that clear coat and the car itaparara. So you need to consider the UV lights if you live in a very hot area. So you need to get a cover. You cover the car and you get a cover that is breathable, an outdoor cover that is breathable and has multiple protection layers that iko na cotton ndani so that you can cover the car. Once you cover the car, you leave the windows half open, all this space right here. You leave the windows half, you can leave a small space for the air to circulate inside the vehicle to avoid the stuffiness when you leave it for a long period of time. Now, that is if you live in a very hot area. You need to protect the car from UV lights that can damage the clear coat. If you live in a very humid area, place yenye ni baridi tupu, you need to store the car in a closed space or a place where it is dry and has warmer temperatures. You know, if you leave it in a humid area, the interior, the upholstery, viti, utapata zimeanza kuform molds, juu hizi window shades zimeanza kuform hizo mildreds. So you have to consider the humidity. At that humidity, you can get a dehumidifier in a garage that you can, unaweza yeka hata yenye iko na granules, uyeke ndani ya gari so that the air in the car, it is not moist. Moist air, it can cause oxidation. So the bare metal components zinaweza anza kurust. You need a dehumidifier or place the car in a dry garage that has warm air. Humid air itaharibu gari. The best enemy ya gari ni hizo humidity. Ina cause rust because oxidation causes rust. You need to consider that. So, hot area, you protect from UV. If you live in a very humid area, you protect it from oxidation and molds kumea kwa upholstery. So you need to consider those two things. The next point is to keep the rodents from the engine bay and from the car, from the interior of the vehicle. Now, rodents are the worst enemies because they will start to chew cables, to chew hoses, those two insulators, they will chew all of them because they are soft. So you have to find a way before leaving the vehicle how to keep them off. So there are two ways. You can either set up traps, na ni kuenda unaenda. You can't set traps, na ni kuenda unaenda. When they trap, they will be needing someone akama ziantrap ndio aache traps zingine. So you need an repellent that will deter the mice, the mouse, all those things from coming from the engine bay because zinapenda tu giza. So you have to get anti-repellents. You can get some few old clothes or cotton. You spray them with peppermint or any other anti-repellent. And then you place inside the engine, because of that strong smell, and inside, the rodents will not come anywhere near. So get anti-repellent because ukiset traps or uweke poison, zikikula zinakufia hata hapa kwa gari. So the next time ukirudi, you will get kuna harufu mbaya sana because rodents zilikufia hapo and you can't identify mahali tena ime, so utaanza kazi ingine. So get anti-reparents and set them in different places of the engine kwenye kuna giza giza, so that to keep rodents away. The next thing that you should consider is the battery, whether you should leave it connected or you should disconnect it. So this is a whole discussion that I want to show you what you should do before leaving it for long periods before using it. So assuming you are leaving it for 1 year. Leaving it for 1 year, hakuna battery yenye ati umeweka kwa gari. Kila siku kuna consumables like the clock, the radio and everything, although radio haziwaki, but there are some consumables zenye zinatumia voltage. So we have to find a way to know whether you should disconnect and leave it disconnected or whether you should leave it connected. So this is what should happen. There are 2 types of batteries. There's a lead acid battery, there's a calcium ion battery. So most of them are lead acid and calcium ion. For lead acid, when you leave it connected for long periods of time, charge itaenda chini. And when the charge inaenda chini, it forms what is known as the sulfate ions. Ikiform sulfate ions, ina degrade because that process is irreversible. Huwezi reverse. So when you store a battery for long periods of time without charge, ina form sulfate ions which is not reversible, huwezi zitoa. So hiyo battery ina degrade hivyo. Even though battery hiyo haribi. Now that is for lead acid. For the calcium ion, it does not form the sulfate ions, but when you leave it without charge for long periods of time, it will also degrade. Kuna gari zenye sana sana hizi ma BMW, ma Mercedes ziko na auxiliary battery. So when you leave the auxiliary battery for long without charge, inaanza kuleak. Ikianza kuleak, even though hizo ma circuit boards zinamwagikiwa na hizo ma acid, gari the next time unakam unapata gari iliharibika. Hizo mavitu zilimwagikia circuit boards, hizo zote vitu zote ma electronics, gari ikaharibika. Sasa the next time yenye unakam, the first thing ni kutafuta mechanic. So you should get a trickle charger that will keep monitoring the battery. In case voltage inashuka kidogo, ina charge. In case voltage inashuka kidogo, ina charge. You should get a trickle charger. Unachaka umei-connect kwa battery. For example, this is the battery for this specific BMW. You leave it connected so that it keeps an eye on the battery. Iki-discharge, ina charge. Don't disconnect. Uki-disconnect, hiyo battery ikishuka voltage, utapata imemwaga kila kitu. Utakuja kununua battery, which is not good. So get a trickle charger. It will be worthwhile. The 5th thing that you should consider is the fuel. Whether your car is petrol or diesel, you should consider the fuel. Since you are leaving this car for a long period, you have to know, will this fuel damage the car? So for example, I'll start with, for petrol engines like this specific one, if I'm going to leave this car for like 1 year, I'm going to ask myself, will the fuel damage all, kama tank ni plastic or it's metallic? So if it's metallic, it means siwezi acha gari bila mafuta because it will start rusting, because itaja hapo hewa, hiyo humidity itaanza kuoxidize, hiyo metal ianze kurust. So I should leave it with fuel, the petrol one, I should leave it with fuel to avoid the tank from rusting or from anything that might occur. Now the problem is this with the petrol. So petrol or gasoline, it usually stays for 3 or 6 months, alafu ina expire. Now when you leave it with full tank, ile mafuta iki expire inaanza, because of evaporation or all those things, that the reaction that can happen, you need to add a fuel additive that will prevent oxidation and will prevent any reaction from occurring within the fuel system. So you need to add an fuel additive that will prevent the fuel from expiring and prevent it from oxidizing, so that it can, hizo ma systems zianze kurust. That is for petrol. You need to add the additives. Then for diesel haina shida za ku-expire or anything. What happens with the diesel, inakuwa kama maziwa. So diesel will not expire, but there will be microbacterial. The bacterial grows all over the fuel system. So you need to prevent those diesel bugs from forming in your tank and within the fuel system. So you add an additive ndio usipate gari hata ilimea sijui nini, mabakteria zilifanya nini, zikakula cooling system yote hata iliharibika. It will cost a fortune to repair. So what you need to do is to add fuel additives that will prevent diesel bugs and those bacterial growths, and then you prevent the gasoline one, the petrol from expiring and oxidation. So you should first thing leave the tank with full tank. Unaeka kwanza nusu, una add hizo ma-additives, then hiyo nusu ingine una add ma-additives zikiwa ndani. You run the car for like 10 minutes so that it can circulate throughout the system, and then unaiacha ikiwa hivyo. The sixth point that you should consider are the tires. You have to consider them because when you leave the car parked for long periods of time, they get what is known as flat spotting. Ina deflate over time, and then because of uzito ya gari yote imekalia ka point kamoja hivi. You see like this one, this is the point whereby uzito yote ya gari imekalia. So over time it will deflate and you will get what is known as a flat tire. When you get a flat tire, the point yenye iko in contact na ground itapata what we call a flat spot, and it can be permanent spot. So for 1 month or 2 months inaweza kosa kuwa permanent. Unakam unaongezea pressure na tire inarudi kuwa mzuri, but if you leave it for more than 6 months deflated, you get what is known as a permanent flat spot. So tire inakuwa damaged completely because uzito yote ya gari imekalia a single spot. So na ni kwenda umeenda, uwezi achia msee ati after every month juu anarudisha mbele na nyuma so that to distribute the weight equally. So what we do, you get a flat spot protector. Kama hizi nini za kanjo ama hizi za kuprotect, hizi za kuchoke huko. Unaona kazi ile za trailer za kuchoke ndio isirudi reverse. You can get a flat spot protector. Uache kama umekanyangisha hapo juu. Ukikanyangisha juu ni kumaanisha you have a wider surface area yenye tire imekalia. So you won't get a flat spot, and then you over inflate the tire a little bit by like 3 psi or 0.2 bar. Una over inflate kidogo ndo hata ikideflate inabaki bado iko within the range. So you get an flat spot protector, ama unaacha gari umeteka huko juu. Ndio maana unaonanga wase wameacha gari imesuspendiwa juu. If you got a small garage in your house or in your home, you can leave it suspended and then uiache hivyo. The next thing that you should consider are the fluids in your engine bay and in the vehicle. So for example, one major fluid is the coolant. You have to make sure umeacha gari ikiwa na coolant because iko na antifreeze kama glyco, iko na anti-rust, ina prevent oxidation. So when you leave the car for like an year, utapata haijarust ma internal components and everything. So use coolant. If you live in a very cold area, venye temperatures inaenda beyond 0, upate hata kumbe maji yenye ulieka ilisha freeze, karibu mavitu huko ndani. So use coolant. Wacha kama gari iko na coolant, usidrain coolant ati ubakishe ati engine haina coolant. Ita trap moisture huko ndani, na hivyo ndo moisture ita oxidize hizo ma components zako zote zirust. So ukirudi tarudi kubaya engine. And then you refill the windshield wiper, all the reservoirs, all the fluids unazi refill. You refill the windshield wiper, the coolant, you make sure that it's the coolant, not water, so that everything will remain in pristine condition mpaka ile siku utarudi. The next thing that you should consider is the handbrake. Why? You should not leave it engaged for long periods of time. Itapata hata kumbe ilishikana na disc. So the brake disc is made up of cast iron. So over time itarust. Juu cast iron huwa ina react na air, hewa ya kawaida tu na maji. Ndio maana asubuhi ukiamka unapatanga disc imerust kidogo. So you should not leave the handbrake engaged to avoid it from fusing with the rotor. And also on that point ya handbrake, you should not apply grease or brakes add the anti-rust kwa brakes. The next time you are back, utaingia kwa barabara, ukitest gari yako, unakanyanga brakes, kumbe ulipaka grease, haishiki, inateleza tu. So it's very risky. So don't apply any form of grease or anti-rust or anything on the braking system. You just leave it as it is. Borake usi-engage hard brake to avoid them from fusing with the rotor. So just leave it as it is. The next thing that you should change is the engine oil. You have to drain the engine oil. Na ufungilie oil filter ingine. This oil filter right here. You change the engine oil and then you change the oil filter because of foreign substances such as water, carbon buildup. Hizo mavitu zote that zinaweza fanya oil ikue acidic. Ukiacha gari ikiwa na acidic oil, what will happen is that hizo ma-seals, ma-gaskets, hizo vitu zote zitachapa. And since you don't want that ukirudi upate gari yako ikiwa fiti, you change the engine oil and then you change the oil filter. Then kwa combustion chamber, because oil, if it's a dry sump, we have two types of sumps. We have the dry sump and the wet sump. Wet sump ni ka ile ya Subaru ama Boxer yenye sump iko kando kando. Then for the dry sump ni kama hii yenye sump iko pande ya chini. So ukiwekea oil hapa juu itashuka mpaka hii inaseto huku chini. So what you should do to make sure the internals zinabaki zikiwa na lubrication, you use fogging oil. Inaitangwa fogging oil. Unaacha engine ikiwa na fogging oil. So what fogging oil does, inabakishanga hiyo chuma, tuseme ni camshaft, inabaki with a thin film of oil. Ikibaki na thin film of oil ni kumaanisha the next time unakam kuwasha hiyo gari, haitakuwa kwanza ati bare metal before oil itoke hapa juu ifike hapa juu kwenye kuna camshaft, ati zishagwa rana dakika kiasi. That's what we call wear and tear. To prevent that, you use fogging oil yenye ina form a thin film of oil, ndo ina stick hapo mpaka ile siku yenye utarudi kuwasha gari. You use fogging oil to prevent the internals from premature wear and tear. And then you change the oil filter and then you change the oil to prevent the engine from seizing. Hizo ni hata ukiangalia hizi vitu zenye hutumika occasionally kama lawn movers, hizi ma chainsaws. Ukiacha sana for long period, tuseme season kama 2 hujatumia, utakuja kuwasha hiyo kitu na hata itachapa. Unajaribu kuwasha because ni bare metal surfaces zina grind and then zinachapa. To prevent that, you use what is known as the fogging oil. The last thing that you should do is to protect the bare metal surfaces. You can see right now I'm holding a WD-40. It's a penetrating oil, anti-rust spray lubricant. It's an anti-rust. You spray all the bare metal components with this one to prevent them from rusting over time. This is an WD is water displacement. So any moisture yenye inaweza harm hiyo chuma haiwezi. Na ukiweza, you can add the crocodile coat from the other side of the vehicle. Na ukiwacha utapata ati sijui imefanya. The crocodile coat. And then for the bare metal components, you spray them with WD. The next time you are coming back, utapata gari yako bado iko in pristine condition. So those 10 points are very critical before leaving your vehicle for long periods of storage.